At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Welcome to a special edition of the Ankler Podcast. I'm here with Ankler CEO Janice Min, who has a brand new interview with author Michael Wolff, who has a brand new book out called All or Nothing, looking at the Trump 2.0 campaign. Janice, how things turn out? All or nothing? Which one?
I think we're in the all part.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate description of the era we're in right now.
Yeah. So the conversation with Michael, I hope everyone enjoys it. It's, as many people know, Michael is the chronicler of Donald Trump. This is his fourth book about Donald Trump, which kind of averages out to about one book for every year Trump has been president. And this book in particular covers the campaign, takes you behind the scenes of what was happening in the Trump campaign. No one will be surprised to hear me say it reveals a lot of chaos, but I think there's a really fun part of the book where he shows what was happening on the Trump side of things during the Biden-Trump debate and how they were responding to it. Some other great points. There's discussion about everyone's favorite topic, Elon Musk, Jared and Ivanka, the absence of Melania. And Michael has some sort of chilling and great thoughts about the state of media right now in relation to what can feel like a backpedaling on coverage of Trump.
Yeah, certainly. The story's not over. There's probably another book in there somewhere in a few years ahead, Janice. What do you think?
I think we'll probably see another book.
Michael will be back on the pod. Yeah.
Yeah, for every year. But when I say that he's going to have a book maybe every year for the era of Donald Trump, I will say he has some thoughts about what actually is going to happen to Trump this term and the possibility that, might not make it till the end. So,
all right. Well, all right. I love a juicy lead, Janice. Way to do it. Let's get to the interview. Here's Janice's chat with Michael Wolff.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Janice.
How are you?
Good.
Congratulations on the book, All or Nothing. This is your fourth?
My fourth Trump book, yes. My 12th book overall.
Did you ever think 1/3 of these would be devoted to Donald Trump?
It never occurred to me that even one would likely be devoted to Donald Trump of all people.
So the New York Times gave a pretty great review to your book, and it's nice to beat the house sometimes. Exactly. And they likened you to, let's see, what Robert Caro was to Lyndon B. Johnson. You are to Donald Trump, and I guess now you have written as many books almost as he has been in office, the number of years he's been in office.
Yes. Thank God I write them faster than Robert Caro.
So let's just start with probably what would be viewed as a great gift being handed to the publication of your book on Truth Social, which, as you note many times in your book, is not a platform anyone reads except to see what Donald Trump is saying.
And not even that, really. I mean, it really is fundamentally a platform, a social media platform of one.
And for people in the news to read.
And even they, I don't think, read it, because I do read it and have over the course of this campaign. And you would have at any moment kind of stopped the presses to say, here is a person coming apart at the seams. And that was never reported in those terms. Occasionally, a Trumpian post would become part of the news cycle, but not the fact that there was every Trumpian post would actually be 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 such posts, with even people within the campaign saying, oh my God, it's just like we're saved by the fact that he is no longer on Twitter, because nobody really sees this stuff.
Well, I want to get into that because you in your book, you go into a character named Natalie who plays a part in at least helping him post and encouraging the posting.
Helping him do apparently everything.
Everything. The delightful anecdotes about the wireless printer that she carries to feed him flattering stories about himself all day long.
Sometimes carrying it on her back on the golf course.
Okay, so Donald Trump on February 23rd, so 2 days before the release of your book, he writes that so-called, and he puts in quotation marks, author Michael Wolff's new book is a total, capital letters, fake job, just like the other capital letters junk he wrote. He called me many times trying to set up a meeting, but I never called him back because I didn't want to give him the credibility of an interview. Others in the administration were also called. They reported his calls and likewise did not talk to him. So I've read your book. It seems like that probably was not the case, that people were indeed talking to you.
No, and even he acknowledges that a little further in this rather long screed against me. He acknowledges that apparently some people spoke to me. He calls them meaningless people, but he always does that. And I think the acknowledgement that some people spoke to me if you interpret in Trump language, means that he understands that many people, if not all of his people, spoke to me, which might augur then a internal witch hunt about this, which I suspect is sort of going on. And this is the reason for his post. And there were two other posts, too. There was a post from the Stephen Chung, the communications director.
Yes.
I believe that was the one in which I was a lying sack of shit. And then Chris LaCivita and Jason Miller had a separate
a co-signed post.
Yes. So you can read that how you want. I think it's everyone rushing to cover their ass.
And when you see, I think we're in this age where you see our politicians and the Republican Party, they live in terror of an errant tweet or a Truth Social post coming their way from Trump. I'm just curious how you process these when they happen.
Well, I've been through this before.
Of course.
And they tend to sell books. At the same time, it is, you are fundamentally being threatened by the President of the United States. And there was a time in the course of all these years I've been writing about Trump when you thought, well, what can the President of the United States do to an author in America? We are pretty safe. Has that changed? I think people are keenly aware that could change in greater and lesser ways.
Is anyone advising you to change your normal course of promoting a book?
I think that there is a lot of concern in the greater media industry about taking on the subject. I mean, we know what's happening. We know ABC was had to enter into a settlement. CBS is now in settlement discussions. This is as actually someone in the administration who was annoyed about the book and who called me and whose call I took. You see these calls, their name comes up on the phone, you think, and the name is, by the way, would be on the phone because actually I have spoken to them before. So just saying. And you think, oh, should I take this call? But I often feel kind of honor bound. Okay, you want to yell at me. I wrote about you. You can yell at me. But this person was very much, I'm sure you understand we are in a new climate. This is a new climate. This was repeated several times. So I understood that that's the messaging point. And I think a lot of people certainly in a lot of media companies are aware of this.
Well, just going back, I think for people who might be new to the Michael Wolff Trump orbit or weren't around for the first term, when you wrote Fire and Fury, which became a #1 New York Times bestseller, it was a very different time. And you've kind of been his antagonist. But I think what is not represented in his pushback on your current book is that he tried to stop the publication of Fire and Fury to no avail, was a huge media story, and then spent so much time demeaning you, talked about how awful you were. And then was it the second or third book, you were at Mar-a-Lago seeing Trump. So he actually indeed has a relationship.
Yes, having dinner with he and Melania on the Mar-a-Lago terrace. struggling, I might say, to get a drink.
Because it wasn't getting served to you?
Yeah, exactly. My literal hand glass was constantly out as people came by. No luck.
You talk about this in All or Nothing, just the scene at Mar-a-Lago where it's like every night is sort of Trump's prom. Can you just describe what that is like to walk into Mar-a-Lago?
Well, yeah, no, it's a very formal ritual at this point. The terrace fills up, and it's filled up by about 7:00, and at which point he appears, and everybody stands and everybody applauds. And then he takes his seat with whoever his guests are. On occasion, that will be Melania, but only on occasion. And then he spends the rest of the dinner as he puts the steak into his mouth between bites, talking to the well-wishers and ass-lickers and bootlickers and the general Mar-a-Lago sycophants and their guests.
Well, can you recount, because I remember laughing very hard when you were describing this to me, that he, and this is very Trumpian, that he ends up, you're his greatest antagonist for a period of time, but then the book is a huge bestseller, and then he loves you because you get great numbers. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Great ratings. He gets, that's what this was. In the backstory to this, because I get all backstories in Trumpworld, it was related to me that somebody went to him and said, hey, Michael Wolff is writing another book. That was a third book at that time. And Trump said, oh, he gets ratings. Let's see him. And then immediately an invitation was issued, and I found myself sitting with him for hours in the Mar-a-Lago lobby where he conducts all of his business. The Mar-a-Lago members passing by, Trump kind of acting like the club tumbler, greeting, hope you had a great day, hope you had a great day. Oh, are you sisters to a obviously mother and daughter? And then dinner, and, it was, we made a day of it.
So this is something weird. You and I have both spent time with Trump, and he's kind of fun. I mean, did you find it fun minus he is a, current or former or future president? I think it's worth stating that my long adventure with Donald Trump began because of you. Because you called me one day in the spring of 2016 and said, would you like to interview Donald Trump? That's right.
And at which point it was still a preposterous notion that he would become the president of the United States. And I said, well, yeah, that's interesting.
So, as a reminder, you were in New York, and he was coming to Los Angeles for the California primary. And I had actually emailed Hope Hicks. I had emailed Donald Trump before when he was even more improbable, when he was just sort of the reality show candidate, before he had even become the party nominee.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So anyway, I had interviewed him, and then Hope Hicks, very available. I think the one question was, is this a cover? This was when I was at the Hollywood Reporter as the editor, and you were a contributing editor. And then when the answer is yes, all doors open, and you decide you can make it work out.
Yes, and it was. There was that moment of hesitation. Is Donald Trump really worth getting on a plane and going to Los Angeles? But I went, and we had a fine time. I mean, I actually had to meet him in the green room of the Jimmy Kimmel show. We talked there, and, that was, people running for president, they only give you a limited amount of time. And I remember Hope Hicks saying, well, it's time, Mr. Trump. And we had spoken for, like 35 minutes. And he said, you don't just give Michael Wolff 35 minutes. And then there ensued an invitation to come back to his house in Beverly Hills. Who knew he had a house in Beverly Hills?
Exactly. Near the Beverly Hills Hotel, correct?
Exactly, across the street from where I was staying conveniently. So I met him there, and he threw me a tub of Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream, and then we sat on this kind of cast-off hotel furniture that he had.
I think you said 3-star hotel furniture.
Yes, for hours as he monologized, And yes, was occasionally charming. I mean, he can be quite funny. Is he aware that he is being funny? I mean, his humor is mostly saying terrible things about other people, which can be funny if you're not the person he's saying terrible things about. And because he's a politician saying things that no other politician would say on the record to a reporter, it is amusing.
You kind of can't believe what's coming out of his mouth, which is sort of the entertaining part of it.
That's the entertaining part of it. And then the scary or unhinged part of it is that it just goes on and on and on, and not necessarily at a coherent length either.
Right. So you turn around this story. It's a cover story of The Hollywood Reporter. And I wouldn't say it was a particularly flattering story about him. I mean, I think I remember distinctly the story made a lot of news because when you brought up Brexit, which was a big thing at the time, he did not know what it was. And I think there were, other examples of sort of outrageous things he didn't know, didn't care about, and perceived by many people offensive things that he said.
And then that was the one I asked him. Every president gets that question,
Yes.
What's your favorite book? And every presidential candidate answers the Bible.
Right.
Donald Trump, and I remember he had a little look in his eye, okay, you got me look. But then, out of nowhere, out of his high school past, somehow he surfaced All Quiet on the Western Front.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with a Business Unlimited smartphone plan. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second internet plan with savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
So, this cover comes out. It had this design on the front cover that his team liked. And I remember I get an email from Hope Hicks saying, cool cover. No comment about what was written or what was said, none of it. And so this, again, goes to the entanglements you've had with Donald Trump. You end up somehow in the White House sitting outside of his office in the West Wing for quite a period of time, and hence Fire and Fury is born. Can you just talk about how that even happened?
Well, first of all, I ended up in Trump Tower.
Right. Yes.
There was a confluence, a convergence of two events here. I mean, there was the Trump event with the Hollywood Reporter, and then that same spring, I was in Orlando giving a speech.
I feel like you wouldn't be invited to Orlando today, just saying.
I was in the airport and a guy saw me, recognized me clearly. I have no idea who it was, but, at like 20 paces, and seemed overjoyed to see me, dropped his bags, came over, gave me a big hug, and said, what great work I was doing, or something like that. And then, this occasionally happens. Then you think, this will come to me, right, who this person is. But it didn't come to me. And then I put it out of my head after struggling. And maybe, weeks later, 6 weeks, something like that, out of the blue, I saw a story somewhere about Breitbart News. And there was the picture of Steve Bannon. And I thought, oh, my God. The guy who hugged me in Orlando.
In multiple shirts, no less.
And then several months later, he took over the Trump campaign. I wrote him an email, my best friend, Steve Bannon, and he said, come up to any time. And so suddenly I was around Trump Tower. Actually, we did a piece. I did the first interview with Steve Bannon. And then after they won, which still was mind-boggling, I thought, and I went to Bannon and I said, what if I came into the White House, for the first 100 days and wrote a book? He said, well, you got to ask Trump. Let's go ask Trump. So we went upstairs in Trump Tower, and I said, and then he remembered the Hollywood Reporter article and said, again, great cover. And I said, I'd like to come into the White House as an observer. And he thought that was a job, deputy assistant observer. And I said, no, I want to write a book. And you could just see the glaze over his eyes. And he said, yeah, sure. And I left with Bannon and I looked at him and he said, yeah, sure. And so that became the invitation into the West Wing. And I stayed there for, I think, 7 months.
Which is amazing. And when the book came out, when Fire and Fury came out, no one could believe. I mean, this spoke to the disorganization of the first term of Trump's, and the fact that no one was buttoned up enough to sort of ask, why were you hanging around? And I recall people in the media get some kind of special badge, right? Like some kind of access to the White House. And you had some entirely different other kind of badge.
Right. Entirely, yes.
And when the book came out, I remember there were lots of people in whatever we now call mainstream media who were sort of furious that you bent the rules and gotten a different kind of story that they had access to. You were not in the White House briefing room.
Exactly. Yeah. Still to this day, they are miffed.
So you're All or Nothing, the current book. One of the things that you have always been really good about chronicling is sort of the chaos and almost like this cult of personality around Trump and the people who work for him. And they are subject to sort of shocking amounts of verbal abuse from Trump. It's chaotic. They don't really know what's happening. They don't have control, but they stay with him and they're unfailingly loyal. What is that?
Well, I would question their loyalty because they're all talking to me. I think they're quite clearly not loyal, and they're quite clearly, I have often found fairly clear-eyed about the absurdity of the situation that they are in. So I think it's one of the weirder relationships in politics. And also, there is the background that everyone does know, certainly everyone should know, that for 100% of the people who have worked for Donald Trump, it comes a serious cropper. They're humiliated, fired, indicted. It doesn't end well for anyone. I mean, this is 100%. There is no escaping this. So it becomes an even more complicated question of what are they doing there and why would anyone do this?
And what's your answer to that?
Well, I mean, I think it's partly structural. If you're in this business, if you're a Republican political operative, you literally have nowhere to go. This is life as we know it. And if you're going to go down with the ship, it's the only ship. So you may go down. What's the difference? And then there is a kind of thing, I guess, that you believe, not me. Somehow I can surmount this. Elon Musk clearly believes he can surmount this. I assume J.D. Vance believes the same. And then, there is this other aspect that there's only one virtue in politics, which is winning. And Donald Trump wins, and no one can really quite explain why. And they almost begin to chalk it off as some kind of magical thing about him, but he does win.
Well, in the book, you talk about the incredible luck of Donald Trump, the assassination attempts, the ear getting grazed because he had turned his head at a certain moment, the Supreme Court ruling in his favor around presidential immunity. And I think there is something where I would have to imagine for some of his diehard acolytes, like he does almost seem like the chosen one. It's hard not to see this string of luck as unbelievably unusual.
Totally, but that should not disguise the fact that luck always crashes.
Right.
So, one of the things about him is Donald Trump is incredibly self-destructive, but that self-destructiveness becomes part of his appeal. The High Wire Act, doing the things, saying the things that no other politician would say, a complete lack of caution in anything that he does. And it makes him, you can't take your eyes off of him. Having said that, self-destructive behavior is still self-destructive behavior, and it does catch up with him. Now, the amazing thing is that he then picks himself up again, rises from there, and goes on again.
A man with not 1 ounce of shame.
Clearly, there's no shame, and his reality is not our reality. Right. So the reality of disgrace, which God knows he was in and certainly should have felt after January 6th, after defeat, impeachment, January 6th, rejected by virtually everyone in the leadership in his party, sent off from Andrews Air Force Base with hardly anyone there. So that should have been, you should have said, okay, this is it. I fucked up and I'm going to pay the price. No, not in the least.
Well,
no acknowledgement of that, no external acknowledgement, and I would suspect no interior acknowledgement either.
I think you allude several times in the book to the fact that he doesn't seem to have an interior life.
In my long New York life, not quite as long as Donald Trump's, but almost, one of the things that it has been marked by is for years, actually, it would be now for decades, seeing Donald Trump out at night. Almost every time I went out, which was at best sporadically, there would be Donald Trump, indicating that he was always out. Mm-hmm. I think the truth is, for 50 years, he's just lived this external life.
Right.
Lived out there, searching for girls and approval and all the kinds of things that you get outside. It's looking for nothing inside.
Right. Well, so you were on this campaign, talking to people in the campaign pretty closely for the entire run. And now I think we just hit the 1 month anniversary of Trump being in office.
It already feels like years.
Well, Elon Musk doesn't really factor in all or nothing until closer to the end of the book.
And that is actually, so that's historically what happens. Trump really doesn't have any interaction with Elon until the final, really 2 months of the campaign.
So explain, you talk in the book about how much Trump loves chaos. He loves, I think you make some fire engine analogy. He likes driving a fire engine to disaster or something like that. He loves the chaos. He's
not interested in the fire. He's interested in the fire engine and the noise around it.
So even you, as this chronicler of Donald Trump, are you surprised by what has happened in the past 4 weeks?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's the same, just more of the same. And that's a Donald Trump thing. You just double down on what you've done in the past. And it's actually necessary to double down because that's the way you're holding attention. I mean, Donald Trump is only interested in headlines. Everything is expressed in headlines. If there is any point to what he's doing, it will be done by the headlines. Headlines are what keeps him at the center of attention. But that only works if you just can't do the same thing. You can't run at the same pitch. You have to keep scaling it up. That is what we're seeing, that element of what can we do next? What is bigger?
Well, one of the things you note in All or Nothing is that he actually doesn't like to govern. And being the president, having won, is not the enjoyable part of this experience. It's the winning or the chase.
And the attention, always that. But those other issues, is he interested in policy? Of course not. Is he interested in building coalitions? What you do in government? Of course not. Is he interested in the workings of the bureaucracy? Of course not, which is why we can just get rid of it all.
But is it your understanding that Elon Musk is doing this with his support or doing it unilaterally?
Well, my interpretation of the Elon phenomenon at this point would be that he's useful to Trump. So Elon is setting himself up for the blame, which will surely come. And then also Trump has gotten himself into a bit of a bind with Elon because the press keeps saying that they will inevitably fall out. Therefore, he has to do the opposite of what the press says he will do. Therefore, that has now bound him to Elon for the moment. But let's remember that Elon kind of occupies the position that Steve Bannon did in the early part of the first Trump administration. Elon was on the cover of Time magazine saying he's the real president. Bannon was on the cover of Time magazine saying he was the real president. Bannon lasted for 6 months.
Right.
So, I think if you're looking for a measure here, that's a pretty good one.
And so when things are happening like Elon Musk or Bannon, who is sort of 1 foot in and still ostracized is what it sounds like. But when they're doing things like making the Sieg Heil, how do you pronounce it? The Nazi salute, the Hitler salute. Does that even register in Trump's orbit?
No, and I would say that that's a media thing. If you think about guys who do a lot of gesturing, which they do, on a single frame photo, you can catch that. So I would say that's just the media doing what it does unhelpfully.
Let's talk about the media. So there was this so-called, resistance movement from the time Trump took office in round one. And that seems to have certainly become much quieter or fallen by the wayside. What are you seeing? How are you feeling about it all?
It's a very confusing, gobsmacking reality inversion that he was actually elected again. And, I know that throughout my reporting, as it became clearer to me that it was a very good possibility that he could be elected again, virtually nobody who I knew believed that.
Right.
It was just not possible. And then he won, and won kind of, if not resoundingly, well, it was kind of resounding. It was certainly definitive. And so I think that there's a certain kind of shame that people are experiencing. How could we have let this happen? And the Democrats, I think did overtly fuck it up.
Yeah.
I think the things that they did, you look at them now and you say, what did you expect?
Like what?
Trump was always of the opinion that the easiest person for him to defeat would be Joe Biden, but the second easiest person would be Kamala Harris. And he very much saw a set of figures that he was afraid to run against.
Who would he have been afraid to run against?
Well, Gretchen Whitmer, he thought was very formidable. He thought he could not believe that Shapiro was not on the ticket.
Right.
And he always thought that they would not let Biden run, and that Michelle Obama would be, and then he would be wiped out if it were Michelle Obama.
Well, you report in your book that he also had his nickname ready for Michelle Obama, which was to call her.
Right. So yes, she was going to be Mike because she was so manly, and then he would talk in this strange way about the size of her back. I was like, okay. But so I think the Democrats and the liberal media are have found themselves in this moment of questioning themselves profoundly. But I also don't think that this will last. I think that this first month has been pow, 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 everybody knocked back. But I think that will pass, and I think that this is, frankly, from the Trump point of view, unsustainable. This is, punk rock provocation level stuff to no ultimate point, and just to get headlines in a self-destructive way. So the self-destruction gets a lot of attention now, but he will pay the price very shortly.
I'm not sure if you saw what James Carville wrote in the New York Times. I think it was today, where he said the best thing for Democrats to do, knowing that all these people who did not support Donald Trump are wondering why no one is fighting on the Democratic side. And James Carville makes the point that there's nothing the Democrats can do right now because they don't politically have any power to do it. So the best thing is to let the Republicans burn out and have the voters turn against them.
And I thought that was an interesting and good piece, but I found myself unable to forget the fact that he was absolutely sure that Kamala Harris would win, and in that same space in the New York Times expressed that opinion, that there was no way that Donald Trump could win.
Okay, so I have to ask you about Melania, because this is a recurring theme in your book, this sort of where's Melania part of the Trump story. And you note that it was this awkward conversation among Trump staffers that she would not be coming to the convention. She would not be at the debate, even though the debate became a whole other story. But then suddenly she is publishing a memoir.
And she would not make any campaign appearance. She would not appear in any courtroom. And yeah, I think she is, I was going to say, as opportunistic as he is. And that seemed, that may be, there may be no one who is as opportunistic as he. But she's certainly keenly aware of the opportunities here and grabbing them. You know, she did this memoir, with the strangest memoir in the whole world. I mean, I really think it is the first completely AI written bestseller.
Where she's pro-choice, if people recall.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no one even thanked in the book, probably because there is no one to thank, you know, and now she's doing this documentary, which she's been paid bazillions for by Jeff Bezos, being directed by Brett Ratner of all people. I mean, this is, you can't make this stuff up. You know, I think that she knows, I think she has always had been very clear about what she wanted to get out of this relationship and what she can get out of this relationship. But make no mistake, this is not a relationship that anyone who has been in a normal middle-class marriage would recognize.
Right. And what's going on with J.D. Vance and Trump right now? In the book, you talk about Trump's ambivalence towards J.D. Vance, and even Elon Musk had, I think at some event, was it election night, J.D. Vance wanted to talk to him, and Elon said, I'm not talking, I think, any fucking vice president.
It was in the second Butler rally.
The second Butler, where his shirt's flying up and he's jumping around. Yes.
Exactly. You know, I mean, Trump is always incredibly resistant to the whole idea of a vice president. I mean, to sharing any kind of platform. You know, I quote someone in the book saying that Trump has questioned, does he really need a vice president? And then he says, no, I don't need a vice president. And even in 2016, you know, he's coming out to announce his choice of Mike Pence. And on the way out is asking aides if I can announce someone else. I mean, Pence is already there waiting. I mean, the whole selection process, if that's even what you call it, is just him rejecting people.
Yeah.
He doesn't want them.
Well, it's power, right? I mean.
Yeah, he just doesn't want he just doesn't want to share with someone. And also, he doesn't really recognize roles, the idea of what a vice president does. Nobody really has a role. There's only one role, and it's Donald Trump. Even after they had chosen Vance, he was saying, why didn't you give me a woman? I should have had a woman. And in fact, he was offered every woman in the Republican Party who he rejected. But then he became obsessed with the fact that it should have been Maria Bartiromo.
From Fox Business, formerly of CNBC.
Whatever. And then there's another Fox woman, Harris Faulkner. And then she became his sudden obsession. They should have had Harris Faulkner. She's a black woman named Harris. How great would that have been?
So, okay, then I want to ask you about some of the other characters who people have been following all these years. Jared and Ivanka, they disappeared and came back.
Well, I always think, you know, Jared is really the only person who survived the first White House.
Right.
And if I were in this White House, I would be looking at Jared and thinking to myself, what does he know that we don't?
Right. You know, Jared was one of his Middle East experts or was something along those lines in the first term. When Trump is talking about making the Riviera of the Middle East out of Gaza, does he mean that? Was it just a headline? How? Well,
he certainly doesn't. He certainly doesn't mean that, and it will certainly not happen. So we're in that kind of reality thing. There's a portion in the book, and this is after Speaker McCarthy is deposed, and there's a movement to make Trump the Speaker of the House. So his staff is in this position of saying, of knowing that this is not going to happen. Everyone knows this is not going to happen. And Trump knows this is not going to happen. But Trump, at the same time, is forcing them to act like this is going to happen. It's the kabuki around what makes a headline, even though you know it's a completely phony idea is what propels much of the daily comings and goings around Donald Trump. So the Gaza Riviera is that kind of thing. And Jared, who is making serious money in, as they say, the region, certainly does not want to involve himself in that kind of...
right. His venture fund is wholly Saudi funded, or at least majority Saudi funded at this point. So you have this comment in the book that really stuck with me where you talked about the joy at the Democratic convention and that Kamala Harris was this, injection of energy into the party. But you write in the book that the Democrats were joyful to be at 50%, which was sort of sad. And they were just happy to have somehow caught up to Trump. So I want to ask you, what is going to happen to the Democratic Party? Who are the leaders? What does this look like in the midterms? I mean, if you can even project that far ahead.
Well, I mean, you can probably project to the midterms. They will probably do well in the midterms. And that will probably ultimately have a negative effect because it will reassure them that they don't really have to do anything.
Right.
This is the pattern that happens. Politics is the movement off of patterns that have worked before is glacial. Where it should be, you would think at this moment in time, they would say, oh my God, we have really messed literally everything up here. So we got to do it differently and we got to figure it out. That really won't happen.
What does Trump think of Gavin Newsom these days?
He doesn't really think of anyone as anything. He doesn't think about other people. Were he to focus on Newsom, he would focus on Newsom's personal life and Newsom as a subject of gossip and Kimberly Guilfoyle and
right. Who's been sent? What country has Kimberly Guilfoyle been sent to?
Yeah, a far off country.
Yes.
But he doesn't really think about people that way. His response to everyone is a visceral response.
Going back to the media for 1 second while we wrap up, you said when we started out that you think this sort of cloud of fear or stunned reaction will lift soon from the media.
Wait a minute. Did I say I thought it would lift soon?
I think you did say that.
I didn't. Well, I certainly didn't mean to. I don't think it will. And obviously, the more the media becomes concentrated, the more it is hunkered down. You can't break through. The media is separate. The news media is now just an adjunct to other interests.
The least profitable part.
Yeah. I mean, when this person from the Trump administration called me up to issue me veiled threats, I said, what are you going to do? Block my merger?
Right.
But that is what all of these companies are thinking. Remember, the media is cycling down in all regard and in all its endeavors. I mean, it's a panicked industry. So therefore, to add Donald Trump as its antagonist at this point is something that its management and shareholders clearly do not want to do.
So let me ask you about two outlets that loom large in Trumpworld. The New York Times, how will they proceed in this landscape?
Well, I think they're curiously the only outlet that seems to be proceeding.
I know. It's amazing, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly the luxury of a newspaper, words that have not been said in many, many years, in which they don't have any licensing issues,
right,
like broadcasters, and they understand their audience. I don't think their audience is. The New York Times audience, maybe the one audience, is not suddenly embracing Donald Trump.
Right.
So I think they're in probably a great place.
Okay. Then Murdoch's and News Corp and Fox News.
Well, that's just, as I have written at some length, just the end game there. One of the things that we saw in this campaign is you might have gone into it. This was certainly Murdoch's view that Trump needed Fox News, that Trump actually could not continue his political career without Fox News. And that turned out to be entirely untrue. And what we see now very clearly is Fox needs Donald Trump.
Well, you have an anecdote in the book about Rupert Murdoch being kept waiting 30 minutes to see Donald Trump, which definitely wouldn't have happened in 2015.
But then, of course, the Murdoch organization is in the throes of this internecine family squabble, which is, I think, is pretty clear what is going to happen with that. And 94-year-old Rupert is going to shortly depart this vale of tears, and then it will be taken over by other interests in his family and rationalized, I think, as they say, the word they use, in a way that changes the nature of this network. And, I've actually had some conversations in inner circles there. And it's interesting that James Murdoch is now saying, that he would keep Fox as a conservative network, but one that told the truth.
Right.
So I'm thinking, Jesus, God.
There's some family support there. So just to wrap up, Michael, obviously, we cover Hollywood. There's a lot of Democratic panic, I would say, out here in the parts of the country that voted for Kamala Harris. Do you have any words to either make them feel better or make them feel like they should get that passport to Portugal, the golden visa to Portugal that they are all talking about?
I continue to believe, Trump is self-destructive, and he will destroy himself. This is unsustainable. You can't alienate every functioning institution in the country.
Will he abide by the law, in your mind?
Well, probably not, which again would be some other, a further self-destructive thing. I mean, just because you don't abide by the law doesn't mean you're going to get away with it. And I don't expect that he will.
Right.
The only question is, when? How long? Another 30 days? Another 90 days?
Another 3 years?
Not another 3 years.
Okay. Well, I look forward to your eventual fifth book about Donald Trump. All or Nothing's great, so congratulations. I know everyone feels maybe full of Trump at this point, but it's entertaining is not the right word, but it is a very enjoyable book to read and a lot of explanation about how we are now here in this moment. So thank you, Michael, for joining.
Thank you, Janice. We'll speak soon.